El Camino, I think I have you for a question a little bit later too, but let's take a look at this. El Camino Mas Largo Brewing, and sorry for my pronunciation there. Cold Crash. I've used Kveik at high temps to make pilsners before, and they turn out okay, but it's not quite the flavor profile I'm looking for. If I ferment a pilsner using lager yeast under pressure, do I need to keep it 64 to 68, or can I ferment it at ambient at 70 to 72? All right, so I'm gonna. I can actually throw this question up in a couple parts here. So this is interesting, and I'm going to give a range of answers on this. First, let's address the whole Kveik lager-like thing. I know people will say with yeast like Lutra and maybe some others that you can make a beer that is very lager-like. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm sure you can make a clean beer. I remember the first time though I had used a lot of American ale yeast in my home brewing career, my time home brewing. And then the first time I brewed a lager at home, I smelled it and I'm like, damn, that's clean. Like there's nothing aromatically other than malt and hops that are in this beer, right? And there was just nothing to it. And I was used to smelling American ale yeast ferment and the finished product. And I'm like, oh, that's clean, you know. But there's just something different. Now, if you want to say lager-like, that's fine. I don't have a problem with Kveik yeast. I've made probably 150 batches of yeast with of beer with Kveik yeast, and I think it's an interesting little critter. But yeah, you're not getting the flavor profile that you want out of those fermentations, and so you're looking at utilizing a lager strain. Now, this is where I'll say some things that maybe some people might have an issue with. I would recommend that you get yourself some 3470, whatever, you know, that's a pretty traditional German lager yeast, pretty well heavily used, maybe the one of the bigger most used lager strains out there. I know guys that have very good palates that are fermenting that strain far higher than what you might think. Okay. I do know some guys that set it and forget it at 60 with that strain, and then after lagering and getting the yeast out of it and getting it brilliantly clear, the beers are very, very clean, and these are people whose palates I trust. So yeah, I think there's a wider range in that. And then we also bring up the idea of a pressure ferment. And just for reference sake, pressure ferments, fermenting under pressure can subdue ester formation. I'll throw up the other portion of the question here real quick too. It can suppress ester formation. And so that means that potentially, well, you can make up for it on the other side. You can increase, you know, fermentation temperature, especially at the beginning of fermentation when the supermajority of those esters are formed, right? I don't, you know, I don't know. There are some issues with pressure fermentation. If you're looking at like harvesting yeast over and over and over, you might have some issues with pressure fermentation. Keeping more CO2 in solution of that fermenting liquid, that CO2 is toxic to yeast, and you may end up finding that you have lower viability, maybe even lower growth, things like that. So just something to consider as far as that goes. But yeah, I mean, you could. What I would do is I would be interested in seeing if you were going to do that at like 64 or 68. I'm assuming you can't ferment lower than that, and that's why we're having this conversation. So let's just try to troubleshoot the problem. I would try to ferment as cold as you can with probably like, see what 5 psi does for you. get some pressure on it, but maybe not all the way up to like 15 psi or 1 bar or whatever people are, what people are doing that at. Maybe see what you get out of that, right? Also, I would recommend check it out with some lager yeast and check it out with some 05. I remember back in the day that Sierra Nevada was doing some lager type fermentations with 05.